I'm Carol Bacak-Egbo, historian for Oakland County Parks. Join me now for an episode of History in Our Parks. Six Little Graves on a Hillside, an Independence Oaks County Park story. Seymour Lake Cemetery is located just north of Independence Oaks County Park. It includes the graves of many people who once lived on land that would become part of Independence Oaks, like George Washington Bailey, Ephanitus Baldwin, and Eldad Smith. So I had visited the cemetery more than once. And I noticed 6 little graves on a hillside, and next to it, a larger monument where the names of the 6 people buried in those graves were listed. It's not easy to read it anymore, but you're able to make out that all 6 died the same year, 1878, and all were children. The children of Edwin J. and Mary J. Bailey. Who were the Baileys? Well, Edwin was the youngest son of Robert and Melinda Bailey, who had come to Michigan in 1836. They had taken up land in Section 2 and 3 of Independence Township. By the 1850s, Edwin, who'd only been a baby when the family came to Independence, had a farm of his own. It was right next door to his brother's farm, Wilson Bailey, and next door to another brother's farm, William Bailey. In 1860, he married Mary Jane Rowe. She'd grown up on the farm of her father, Joseph Rowe, who had a farm directly south of the Bailey farms. By 1872, Mary and Edwin had purchased additional farmland in Independence and even built a second house. But of course, tragedy struck in 1878. What had happened to the 6 Bailey children? The Pontiac Gazette of May 31, 1878 had reported, yesterday, 29th, Mr. E.J. Bailey of this township lost 2 more children, making 6 in all who have died within a short time. The disease is diphtheria of the most malignant type. Records from Oakland County substantiate that the children died of diphtheria. 6 of them between the ages of 3 and 13, all dying between May 6th and May 29th of 1878. It's hard to imagine the effects of such a tragedy on a family. But sadly, to a varying degree, many Michigan families dealt with the effects of diphtheria. In 1870, there had been an increase in the diphtheria deaths across the nation. Between 1869 and 1878, Michigan had been averaging about 229 diphtheria deaths a year. In 1878, that number spiked to 887. And it's likely there were more, since often deaths, particularly of children, went unrecorded. Disease struck in urban areas and rural areas. A newspaper reported that in Flint, diphtheria was so prevalent that the Common Council had directed that signs be placed on houses where the disease was found. As a result, there were a lot of so-called cures that were being offered, like Dr. Trask's magnetic ointment, Dr. J.R. Miller's magnetic balm, Radway's Ready Relief, and Lawson's Curative, none of which, of course, were effective. There were also a lot of theories as to what was causing diphtheria. In urban areas, it was sometimes blamed on the inhalation of foul sewer gas. It was even blamed on the throwing of salt upon ice upon sidewalks. In some cases, it was blamed on impurities in soap, or on damp, musty, moldy cellars. In the case of children like little Johnny Hallway, It was attributed to the fact that he got his feet wet playing with schoolmates. None, of course, were the true causes. What causes diphtheria? Diphtheria is caused by these rod-like bacteria, and it's passed from person to person by droplet transmission, usually by breathing in bacteria after an infected person has coughed or sneezed or even laughed, which of course explains why it spread so quickly in families. It wasn't until the 1920s that a vaccine was developed for diphtheria. Sadly, much too late for the Bailey children. What happened to the Bailey family after the tragedy? The 1880 census shows Edwin and Mary still living on their farm in Independence Township. It also gives some important information. It tells us that there were actually 9 Bailey children when the epidemic of diphtheria struck. Herschel and Eva, the oldest children, appear to have survived the epidemic. But there was a baby, Edwin, who was just 5 months old when diphtheria struck. So had he managed to survive it, or perhaps had the family sent him to live with a neighbor or a relative? We'll never know. It's also interesting to note that they had adopted 2 new children, Alice and Wallace Rice. By 1900, they were living in Lake Orion, where Edwin and his son Edwin had a hardware shop. In 1905, Mary Jane died of pneumonia, and as the Oxford Leader reported, she was buried beside her 6 children in the Seymour Lake Cemetery. In 1910, Edwin moved back to his farm in Independence, where he died in 1914. He was buried on the hillside in Seymour Lake Cemetery, next to his wife and his 6 children.